Have you ready, Tuva?
I'm ready.
You're live. Okay. Tuva, can you hear me okay?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Oh, I hear you.
Excellent.
Uh, all the way from Thailand, and I assume you're in Stockholm.
Yes, I'm in
Although
Stockholm.
with that bright sunshine behind you, it's
Yes,
hard.
yes, yes. You can see. No, you can't see, but it's Östra Real's schoolyard behind me, where some guys actually are playing football. I think it's you, Gordon. Kids.
Do they have masks on though?
No masks. No,
No.
no. They're not keeping the distance either, but they look pretty healthy.
Yeah, well, it's a whole different story in Thailand at the moment. It's like mandatory masks, and you get a temperature check even going into a 7-Eleven now.
But I think that Sweden is the only country not doing it. So I don't know if it's, I don't know.
Sweden and Japan are
In
the two.
Japan. Mm, mm.
But Japan, they are so careful about diseases and everything that it's a very special case that they have.
Yeah, I can imagine. Something tells me that they're more prepared for this than we are. I don't know. But let's see what's happened. But I hope that everything goes well. But
Yeah.
I'm not 100% concerned. I'm not 100% sure that our way of dealing with this crisis is the best one. But
Yeah. Time will tell.
time will tell.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Japan seems to be managing it, and it's funny. It's the two countries where I've actually spent a few years of,
Mm.
and met a lot of people and became very connected. And those are the two countries that are taking this, more progressive approach in a way. So we'll see how it works out. But I'm obviously hoping for the best.
Hope for the best for everyone.
Yeah. So let's get into today's event.
Yes.
I just felt like the meetup, it's been going on now every month for over 7 years, and I couldn't stop it. You know what I mean? Like it was just it's such a steady, regular thing that it would feel like it would rip my heart out to not do it. So and the chance to do it in this new kind of way, I thought, well, you know what, we should embrace this opportunity
Yeah, of
and
course.
jump into it as it is. So let's see how this goes. It might be tragically bad, but actually,
I don't think so. Let's see.
historically, the best meetups were always kind of that way.
Yeah, definitely. So we have people can ask questions through Slido.
That's right. So at
Yeah.
slido.com, and then you enter the hashtag Stockholm Tech, STHLM TECH,
Mhm.
and you'll be able to, ask your questions and vote up the best questions there and help us figure out what the right questions are to ask the special guests as we do every month. And then there will also be, when we do the pitches, at the end of the pitches, I'll unlock it so that people can vote for their favorite startup.
Yeah.
So
Perfect.
there we go. So I'm going to share my screen and we're going to jump into the news. And I see people are now jumping into the Slido, which is great.
Yeah. And
Share my screen here. And as I share my screen, the first thing it pulls up should be the deck with all of the sponsor logos here. Although we didn't rehearse this as usual, so I have no idea what people are seeing actually.
no.
Where's the deck? There it is. Okay, now I see it. So just going through these look like just a bunch of big logos, and they are amazing companies. But the thing they all share in common is that they support this fantastic monthly event that we're doing, and now which has turned into a monthly virtual event.
Mhm.
Microsoft needs no introduction, really, but it's one of the biggest cloud hosting platforms. And my God, that's one of the big stories going on now, is that the cloud providers can barely keep up with all the demand lately.
Yeah.
So we might invite Microsoft to come talk about that next month in detail.
Yeah.
EY, everyone knows, as one of the world's biggest accounting firms, but what a lot of people don't know is they help young tech companies do M&A and merger and acquisitions and their fundraisings and lots of other additional benefits that you don't associate with accounting out. So it's been a great help to a lot of the startups in Sweden who get a lot of their extra help on a lot of the deals that they're doing. Visa, everybody knows, but the thing that people don't know about Visa is they're super engaged in getting fintechs happening, especially in the Nordics. And they have hundreds of APIs.
Really good ones.
Some crazy ones that startups don't know that they have that are free, actually, with like no strings attached. Like every ATM in the planet that you can have access to the plugging that into your app, and all kinds of data. Esri is similar to what Visa is for financial transactions. Esri is for geodata. They are the biggest player in the world for geodata, and they have countless tools to plug into as a developer. Capole is one of our newest partners. In fact, this is their first month as a partner. And this being a Swedish event, Swedes have a really strong reputation for being amazing B2C companies, right? Like Spotify and the video games and, Klarna and all of these things. But the Swedes, I think, need to do a lot more work on the B2B side. And that's where Capole comes in, is they make it really, they handhold startups who need that extra help in doing B2B in the best way possible. And they even work with a lot of the really, really big, the biggest companies in the Nordics, which if you're a B2B company, that's most often your dream targets are going to be those B2B companies. And they help you with those relationships. And then EQT Ventures, most people in the Nordics know at this point, they are one of the big venture firms now. I think widely recognized as one of the big 3 in Sweden and one of the big 10 in Europe now at this point. And NASDAQ needs no introduction at all, actually. Swedish Energy Agency, not much either. They do a lot of investing. They're usually the first people to invest in anyone who's doing anything in green tech these days. Vinge is the big law firm. And similar to EY, they're assumed to be so big that they don't have time for startups, but the reality is totally different. They actually love startups. They give very special access, and they go out of their way to make it very easy for startups to onboard there, which is very nice of them. And Nordea is obviously one of the big banks in the Nordics. I think it's the biggest bank in the Nordics and the Baltics, but they also, similar to all the other partners, the thing that all these companies have in common, just like Nordea, is they love, love, love startups, and they want to engage with startups from a very early stage. And Einar over there is a startup guy himself and will be happy to meet with you and talk with you about how Nordea can be a good partner to you as a startup. So thank you to all of our partners. And as we're jumping in here, we are live at live.sthlm.net.
I need to take a picture of this and share on my social media. So
yeah, blast it out. And anyone can tweet it and Facebook friend it and get a friend who normally isn't able to come to the events. And today they can come virtually and see what the craziness is all about.
yeah, exactly. They don't have to go to Hilton.
Right. You don't have to make it to Hilton and risk getting some kind of virus. You can, unless you want to get you might get a computer virus, but that's the worst that can happen.
That's the worst thing to get. Yeah, exactly.
So jumping in to this month, and this month really, wow, a lot has happened since we met last time. The world has turned all around and upside down.
Yeah.
This was a tweet from a VC in London, Fred Destin, who summarized it in a tweet. Startup founders raising Series A right now, valuations are being wiped out from where he sits in London. It seems across the board down 40% on valuations for startups. All fresh investors are demanding exiting shareholders pony up cash. This makes it much harder to close, and new investors need to see insider confidence. And he goes on his tweet. It's a bit of a thread, but he explains why, in essence, getting deals done is going to be substantially harder in the short term. I know Chamath, who's one of the most looked up to investors in the US, saying similar things in many of the podcasts that he's been on lately. And there's been since we met last month. Because, by the way, the virus was actually already starting when we met last month.
Yeah,
right?
but it wasn't that widely spread. And I think that people still had the, the sense that this is something only happen in Asia. It will not, like the other serious viruses like SARS, etc. No one really believed how big it was going to be and how fast it was going to travel throughout the world.
Yeah, to put a number on, I think when we met last month, there was 2 cases in Sweden.
Something like that. Yeah. Something like that.
In the month before that, there was 1. And then last month there was 2. And now I don't want to guess.
No one's calculating how many are, because we're not testing.
Right.
So.
But one of the things that is happening, of course, is a really beautiful aspect of tech in general, which is tech folks are quite a empathetic bunch by and large, and are wanting to put their skills and their expertise to use. And there's all kinds of cool things. And here's just the first one that I saw, which was in the UK, which UK tech industry formed codeforcovid.org to fight coronavirus, and there's a kind of united effort to do that. And then, of course, in Stockholm, Newion jumped into putting together a kind of their own version of that, and they're calling it Action Against Corona, be part of the solution. And what does it say here? Read more. The coronavirus, COVID is a global pandemic, and they're trying. Anyone who's interested can list whatever project they're working on, and they help find other team members to work on it, and people can find other projects to be part of, which is very cool. And here's a better example, where if you need funding or if you need exposure or find other talent for the issue that you're working on, it seems like a very cool way to help connect people working on those things.
Definitely.
Yeah. And then I started seeing interesting ways that tech is being used and within the context of the virus. And this is one of the most interesting, and it's from China, and it's a pair of glasses. What you see the camera there, right?
I see it.
Yeah, next to this glass, and this camera can detect in real time hundreds of people who has a fever.
So, how is that even possible?
It has a thermal, detector in the camera.
Crazy.
And it's completely mobile. They have these in airports, because when you arrive at Hong Kong airport, and they've had it at Hong Kong actually for a very long time, ever since SARS, as far as I know.
Yeah.
When you come up the escalator, you walk through this thermal camera. But now this is a completely portable thermal camera, so the police can walk around to sporting events or anywhere else in real time and be checking people hundreds at a time. So much more efficient than what we're doing in Thailand at the moment, which is one person with a handheld gun thermometer, and you have to take off your hat and they put it to your forehead. And
in Sweden, we don't have anything at all.
Right.
It's just
a portable thermal scan seems incredibly efficient.
I was actually at Arlanda the other day, welcoming a bunch of friends coming home from Thailand, and we didn't have any thermometers, anything at all. But we had a woman from Folkhälsomyndigheterna, the health department. They were handing out, no gloves, a paper to everyone that came to Sweden. Welcome to Sweden. Please think these are some, guidelines regarding COVID-19.
Any hand sanitizer were they giving out?
No. Not even take a paper. Not even standing like 2 meters ahead and said take a paper or anything at all. She was handing out papers. It was just, I don't know, but hopefully they improve the processes a bit.
That's concerning. So here was another interesting one in Spain, which of course is one of the hot spots globally at the moment. Spain deploys DJI drones, agricultural grade drones, to fight the coronavirus. Spain is dropping disinfectant on large areas using drones, which seems like a really crazy, brilliant tool.
Super.
Yeah, kind of wild actually. But I reference both of these because of Newion and other channels that are looking. There's a lot of people looking for interesting solutions. And there's been some really interesting solutions around face masks, which I should have included, which are these new complete full frontal face masks with like where the snorkel is built into the top.
Yeah.
And you can screw on a filter onto the top of it.
Yeah.
And then it's like you could probably walk right into the middle of a whole bunch of people and not have to worry at all. So there's a lot of interesting solutions out there, and more all the time. And that's the part of tech that is really inspiring, is to see what people are working on there. Here's another one, a Ring-like smart doorbell that monitors people in isolation. And this one is a bit of a cool but scary and crazy, which China seems to have monopolized and cornered the market on. They seem to always combine incredibly cool with incredibly scary technology.
Yeah.
So in this case, it's a smart doorbell. And if you are quarantined and the government wants you to stay home, the smart doorbell stays on your door. Of course, it sees if you leave, but also if you need to call and ask for help, you just press your own doorbell.
Okay.
Yeah. I thought that was kind of a clever use of that device. And there's countless more, and they're popping up all the time, but those were just some I wanted to highlight. Going back into our normal mode of celebrating people getting funding, there are still plenty of fundings going on. And then of course this one caught my eye because it's, if I remember correctly, you happen to sit on the board of Lunar Way here.
I've been sitting on the board actually since the first board meeting. So when I met them, they were like 4 persons in a kitchen table. And now they're growing. They're building a bank, and they are fully fledged banked in Denmark, and they will incrementally launch banking features in both Norway and Sweden as soon as they are implemented.
Cool. Well, I hope this photo is an older photo before the virus got.
Yeah, it's an old photo because we actually have had a name change from Lunar Way to Lunar.
Right.
So this must be at least more than 1 year old photo.
That's not social distancing at all.
Yeah, and they're not allowed to be at the office. In Denmark, they're more stricter in the. So they're more. I think they're maximum. They are allowed to meet maximum 3 persons or something, so it's impossible.
I guess the people on the laptops are people who couldn't make it to the photo shoot.
yeah. We're sitting at some other.
Or they just couldn't fit in the damn room. They're standing outside in the hall.
yeah, exactly.
Digital psychologist takes an 85 million, fears of pandemic.
Mindler.
Yeah, sort of a Cree of mental health in a way, I guess. Both of whom I have to imagine are doing incredible business these days.
Yeah.
Mindler most of all, perhaps. I can imagine.
Both of them. I think that, you don't want to go to the hospital in these days, right? Not even with the smallest infection. So I think that it's great times for Cree as well.
Of course, and I can say I noticed in the non-Swedish press and the kind of European press, I think a German kind of copy and a French copy and all of the Cree copies around the globe at the moment are all getting funded. Because there's clearly a breakout huge demand, which there will be for a very long time, because I think it'll be a while before people want to go to a hospital unless they absolutely have to.
Definitely. And I think also, and that goes basically with all digital products, but I think that we will see a digital leap jump right now, where people will start when you start use Mindler or you start using Cree and you start to have that digital, the digital way of experience different kind of services, I think that you are more likely to stay on those digital services even after this crisis.
Sure.
So I think that we will see digital leap jump right now.
Yep. And here's another digital one. And actually, this is Ingrid
Ingrid,
raises a million. This is a Stockholm startup and a dear friend as well, Piotr, who happens to be on standby at the moment. I need to figure out how to get him into the call. If we can figure this out, this would be very cool.
While you're figuring that out, yes, so this is something I've been thinking about also. This is, I mean, post-corona, I think that, I mean, one thing that you see, you know, what's in the digital era, what is kind of weak points, and one of the weak points are the delivery part, right? So you know, getting the last mile delivery, the last mile working properly, I think that you know, and thinking of it, I can see why it's so difficult to get it to work. But I think that is something that we really see, at least for me personally. I've ordered a lot of things, and it's just, you're upside down, or
wait, let me fix that. Yeah, here we go. Better?
Yes.
So how do I go back to showing it in more of a full screen mode? Where? Oh, I need to stop my screen sharing. That's why. There we go. There it is. Sorry about that. I'm still learning Zoom. Welcome, Piotr. So can speak, if you would, about this. I wanted to invite you on, besides being a dear friend, and I think you even included me in some of the, as an advisor in Ingrid early on, when I think it was called Ship Wallet early on, yes?
Yeah, we it was called Ship Wallet, but as you know, like a lot of the startups with the name Ship or Wallet don't exist anymore. So not a really good name though. So so we changed names to Ingrid. Yeah.
Pitched as one of
the, so it should be trendy to have those female names, classic Swedish female names.
Yeah. But I remember when you pitched Ship Wallet on stage at this event, the monthly meetup,
right?
And the investors were very excited even back then. But it's, according to the press release with the new fundraising, it seems like things are going really well. And I have to imagine with the boom of deliveries and online, you know, ordering, that now would be a really good time for Ingrid. But the question here's the question I had for you is, because this fundraising announcement was just announced like today, actually, which is why I messaged you like the minute I read it. You essentially did the fundraising in the middle of this, you know, pandemic. And I wanted to get your sense for how because when you started fundraising, it hadn't really become a big pandemic yet. But by the time you closed the round, it was a big pandemic. And can you talk about how things changed from the beginning to the end of the fundraising of this?
Yeah, I mean, as Tuva mentioned, like we're in a sector that actually is, you know, gets a whole lot of traction from this unfortunate event of the pandemic.
Right.
So we were having a lot of traction before already. Like Q1 was a really, really great sales quarter for us. And even during the last like 2 weeks of negotiation, we kept closing deals. So, and also we had we were so fortunate to actually deal with with a VC that had the guts to stay in the deal and see the potential of the product and look at the numbers that were coming in throughout the weeks that we negotiated. So I think it was partly a really great kind of timing, unfortunate timing, but great timing in terms of traction, but also that we as a team were able to deliver numbers every day, basically. And that allowed us to close the deal. So we negotiated for like a week, mid-March we closed. And we did not change anything from the initial term sheet. So there was no changes to the valuation, no terms were changed. So, and that's, I think, a lot, you know, we got a lot of help from being, you know, really on to sales during that period, and we continued. So it's like, it's going even better now. I mean, it's like sad to say that we're benefiting from some sort of crisis. But if you look at it from the other side, we're actually helping merchants that really see the critical need to improve their delivery experience. We're getting those merchants on, and they're happy with being, with us serving them with such a big product.
And can you just for I assume it was a couple of years ago, right, when you were pitching the last time? Can you give us, a short intro for everyone that wasn't at that meetup?
Yeah. So as everyone, like everyone knows, the delivery experience sucks, and it's kind of like the last bastion of the e-commerce kind of industry. There are big companies that have been on the front line of this and fixing this problem, like Amazon, and basically built a huge loyalty program around the delivery experience, which is something that all merchants need to do. And they don't have the muscle, like technically the muscle or like the know-how to be able to get on top of such a complex, reality like the delivery experience is. Because even though you're like just serving the Swedish market, you still have to deal with like 30-40 different delivery options. They all have different traits, they all different restrictions. Individual consumers prefer this or that. Like you have all the pickup locations, the opening hours, the cutoff times. Like it's such a huge mess that merchants can't really fix that on their own. So they have to work with a partner. And what we've done is that we've focused on the consumer end of things a lot, which has propelled us into kind of like a market leading position, because the consumer actually, a lot of the logistics and transport companies come from an operations point of view, and they come from a typical B2B background. We come like, you worked at Klarna, so like how powerful it is in the B2B sector if you're actually a B2B to C company. So that's our strength. What we do is that we provide the merchants with a like an end-to-end platform to deal with all the delivery experience issues that might come up for a consumer, like all the way from a consumer trying to planning to buy something. We'll get a lot of information about the delivery options that they can get, the cutoff times, when estimated delivery time. We serve the merchant with a really our kind of most powerful part of the product is that we have, like Klarna, a delivery checkout, like a module that you install into your checkout that basically takes care of everything that has to do with deliveries, even globally.
This is officially the longest elevator pitch I've ever heard now.
Okay. Yeah, we're at floor 42 now. We're stopping.
Yeah,
it's great. Merchants love it. We're able to close a deal in the midst of the Corona crisis. Yeah,
good. Well, thank you for sharing the insight on that, and congrats on the fundraising, even with the virus in full effect. So
yeah,
I assume it won't be long before you do your next round if things keep going this way. So
no, it won't be long.
Yeah, good to see you again as well.
See you soon.
Alrighty.
Bye.
Cheers. Bye.
Thanks.
And I think slide-wise, I just want to remind everybody that you can go to slido.com and use the hashtag Stockholm Tech, STHLM TECH, and ask your questions for our guests who are coming up here. Let me go back to sharing my browser screen. Here it is. So hopefully there you go. The slido.com Stockholm Tech. If you have a QR scanner or on any iPhone, you just open your camera app and point it at the QR code, and it should work, and it will open the link. And then you will be able to ask questions to our special guests, all right here. Henry from Omers, which are based out of Canada. John, who's based in Stockholm, but recently joined Newion, which is based out of Amsterdam. He previously was at Industry Fund and for a few years in Stockholm. And then Bob from OXX. And both OXX, I know, just raised a new fund, which is partly why I want to have Bob on to talk about that. John, I'm looking forward to hearing what his new role as kind of the Swedish lead for this Dutch fund. And then Omers, being from Canada, they've been more active lately in Scandinavia. So I wanted to hear all about that. So what I need to do now is invite all of them in to join this call here. Let me do it like this. John, admit, Bob, admit, and Henry, admit. And welcome to Stockholm Tech Meetup. John, can you hear me okay?
I can. Can you hear me?
Yes, you sound great.
Hey, guys.
Hey,
Hello,
Henry.
guys.
Hey, Bob.
Hey, guys. Hey, how you doing?
Good. Welcome. And it feels, this is bizarre for me, welcoming everybody into a Zoom chat rather than on stage at the Hilton Auditorium. But John, you've been on that stage a few times, I think.
Yeah.
And last time with Industry Fondant, if I remember correctly.
Has it been
And
twice with Industry Fondant?
Excuse me,
Maybe.
what was the question?
was it?
I've been on stage twice. I think,
Twice with Industry Fondant, actually one time with, no, maybe I wasn't before. I maybe with Sticky, I can't remember, but a few times at least. Yeah. Love you guys, great event, thank you.
Are you still in Stockholm, John? Or
I'm locked down in Amsterdam.
Oh, you locked them in Amsterdam.
Yep.
So let's start there, because you're quite well known in Stockholm, especially amongst all the other investors. And tell the story of how the transition from Industry Fondant to this new Dutch, and what are they all about?
First out, I mean, Industry Fondant is an amazing place to be working at, and I love these guys. They do what they do really well. There was never a question of like me not liking that job. It was a great job. However, though, this was a chance for me to do two things. One, to actually do real VC in the sense that not being employed, but actually joining as a partner. But the second one that I think was interesting, I spent so much time at Industry Fondant looking at business as business software startups. So being able to specialize with the fund that does that specifically felt like a great opportunity. And then I met the team and got to know them over a few months, and it was just sort of good fit. Yeah.
And I guess, can you speak a little bit about Amsterdam as a market and as its role? It seems to me, and this is one of the things I focus on, is people always ask me is what's the next Stockholm, in terms of cities that are on the up and up. And certainly the Dutch really seem to be interested in raising their flag as one of the hot startup cities in Europe.
I do think so, yeah. So there's a few sort of unicorns that has come out of Amsterdam, but in terms of sort of maturity, Amsterdam doesn't have as many per capita as Stockholm has, but it's kind of on its way. My sentiment is that Amsterdam feels a lot like Stockholm felt 5, 6, 7 years ago. So they're really it's really starting to happening. You kind of feel everything is coming into place. There's co-working spaces popping up here and there. There's interesting startups here and there. The Dutch, and what's interesting is like most funds here, they do business in both Belgium and the Netherlands. And Netherlands by itself is like 17, 18 million. Amsterdam is something like, I don't know, million and a half by itself. So it's a nice city. It's a great market. Dutch are really good at anything that has to do with sales, anything that has to do with arbitrage. So there's a good reason why Booking.com came out of Amsterdam, for instance.
Right. Yeah, it's funny. And it's also the things that the Swedes are notoriously not that great at.
I guess, yeah.
Maybe there could be some more collaboration between the two.
Yeah, sure.
Good. Let's go to Bob. You're also based in Stockholm, I assume?
Yeah, I am. I moved over here from London about 1.5 years ago to join my colleague Mikkel in the Stockholm office.
And because the firm is kind of, is it fair to say half and half between London and?
Yeah, we have an office in London, an office in Stockholm, and we kind of work as one team across offices. So our most recent deal that we closed was actually a UK-based deal. that I worked on out of here. So we kind of work as one team across both.
And can you give a quick overview of what it is that you're focusing on? From what I understand, it's your focus.
Yeah.
You have a B2B focus.
Yeah, exactly. So we're focused on B2B SaaS at the scale up stage. So kind of typically after Series A, where there's a product in the market and some kind of go-to-market processes that are predictable and repeatable. And we work with founders and management teams to scale those businesses. Typically, that's kind of taking them internationally, so often to the US. Normally, we kind of get involved at around the $2 or $3 million of run rate revenue stage and kind of either accelerate growth and drive something towards a significant Series B. Funnel would be a good example of a business that we worked on through that stage, or invest at a point where a business can kind of go through to break even.
Cool. And one of the questions I wanted to ask you was how, as an investor, and the fact that this fund that you closed actually came in, kind of finalized right before the virus started really kicking up, I guess.
Yeah.
I have to imagine you're not disappointed with that fact.
Yeah, I mean, I would rather not be going out to the market to try and raise a fund now. I mean, clearly,
right.
Money has just kind of left the ecosystem. So, yeah.
Right. And that sort of leads to my next question, which is, does the current environment, and this goes back to the slide at the beginning, if you remember what Fred Destin said in London, about how the landscape is changing. And I think this is one of the things that startups want to get their heads around, because at least in Stockholm, and certainly in London and in Amsterdam, as John was saying, it's more or less been parties and good times and champagne and dancing all night in terms of being
I missed that bit. When was that?
Yeah, well, the invites got lost. You might check your trash folder perhaps. But it's been a lot of, good times. Generally speaking, it has been quite easy to get funding for any decent ideas. So I open this actually to everybody, Henry and John as well. How do you see things have changed really in the last, it's as crazy as it sounds, 2 or 3 weeks?
Yeah.
I'm happy to start or hand over to someone who, Henry, you haven't spoken.
Yeah, Henry, do you want to introduce yourself and answer that question?
Well, sure, I can answer that question. I think we invest across North America and Europe. We have offices in Palo Alto, Toronto, and London. And I think there's definitely been a change on particularly valuation that's happened during the course of the Corona. Although I'm not sure that's sort of fully baked in yet. What I'm seeing, at least at the moment, is it's less that rounds are getting away at lower prices, and more that they're just not getting away at the moment, and people are taking a pause, and internals, if they possibly can, are stopping good companies going out and raising in these circumstances. That's been what I see in Europe, and to a lesser extent what we see in Toronto. But in Palo Alto, it's almost the opposite. The cadence is still there, but the valuations are right off. As in right a long way off where they were even a couple of months ago. And I suspect, to your point, Tyler, that may well be a case of people who've been through a couple of resets already, understanding that perhaps the difference between these companies being around in 18 months and not is how much cash they get on board now, and being much more open about price. I have to say, at the Series A, Series B level, I've not seen that trickle through into Europe yet, but presumably over the next month or two, given that, as what we're seeing at the moment really is deals that are being announced that were either closed or at least on term sheet a good month ago, we'll start to see that come through.
But have you changed your investment strategy? Are you looking for other kind of companies? Are you kind of discussing what will happen post-corona? Have that kind of impacted the way you are looking at the companies?
I mean, we're certainly discussing it, and I don't think it's impacting the way that we're looking at companies that were in funnel already, because we're just carrying on, we're doing what we were doing. But what it's certainly impacting is, not a sort of Corona specific resilience, but I think you mentioned this actually, this idea that this process may well this virus and the the period of time working from home and getting to grips with being on the cloud all day, all night is, does that speed up things that we thought were otherwise happening? And what does that make the next year look like, and the years that follow? And just to give an example, one of our only portfolio company in Stockholm is First Vet, which is a pet care on demand, sort of Cree for pets sort of deal, and it's seeing obviously big uptake because people can't get to the vet. But then the question is this a shift of people, once they've used this product, they're going to use it more? Will they always associate going online veterinary care with that horrible time in their lives? There's all kinds of questions to answer, and it's not
how good the service is.
Well, exactly.
Yeah.
But so I don't think it's as simply as straightforward as, okay, for all of the future now, it's all about Slack and video. It's a question of what are the practical changes that this period of time makes, and how long does it last, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
I tend to agree. That's kind of the outlook that we see as well. I think we think of, to understand some of the thinking here, I think we need to dig into some of the macro going on. And I think one way of looking at this is like there's three phases. There's the pre-peak phase, which would be like everybody's getting infected quicker and quicker, more and more people are dying. Eventually we're gonna peak that. And then we have a post-peak, which is like how quickly can we then get back to some sort of new normal? And then post that, there is the inevitable recession. And I guess then the question is like, at what angle do we get back to the place we were before? And to understand how we think about business, and I think I agree with everything that's been said before in terms of like, yeah, funnel we look into, valuations are probably going to take a hit, but that also kind of depends on company by company, because I see that short term, maybe the valuation, the hit on valuation, I think has been more initialized from companies out to, they're like self-adjusting because they're expecting valuation to go down more than us driving it. Because we have, our holding times are 7-8 years oftentimes, meaning that for at least for the ones that mature well, and sort of there's a long journey. And in terms of like getting the perfect valuation today in those companies, it doesn't really matter. However, if you're impacted severely, and if we're sort of thinking about this as a company that could be severely impacted over a longer time, then it could matter. It's very hard, but you have to connect it to the macro and which industry are you in and how you think you're going to be in long term. Kind of I'm not sure I have the perfect answer, but I think that's kind of the general sentiment in the industry right now.
Bob, what's your thought? Are you in the same?
Yeah, I'd agree. And I think that kind of uncertainty around the post-peak kind of macro, I think particularly what John said about kind of the uncertainty around the length of time that the recession that follows the peak will last. It's kind of big question because, on a global macro basis, the biggest institutions and the biggest sources of funding have just gone kind of risk off, which means that the allocation to venture globally has just massively decreased, and therefore kind of supply and demand, prices will go down, and valuations will go down. And I think the question is kind of when does that change? And at the moment, no one has any kind of really good evidence-based idea around kind of when that changes. And that, I think that massive amount of uncertainty is leading to kind of reluctance in venture for people to make capital calls.
But it's also interesting to think, I'm a product person, and as a product person, you constantly think about the customer behaviors and change customer behaviors. And I think that this kind of crisis will definitely change customer behaviors. I mean, the only thing we know is that we will not go back to normal. We will go back to, as John said, the new normal. And what is that? And I mean, what will we continue go to big conferences? Maybe, maybe not. I mean, what are the things we don't want to do? What, that's, I think it's super interesting.
We've had one example within our fund. We've had a few examples within our fund, but I can think of one kind of at the top of my mind. We invested in a business called Codility last year. And what they do is they automate developer recruitment and allow you to kind of provide remotely testing for developers. And obviously you might kind of have a concern about that business going into a recession, which is kind of what's happening in the recruiting market, how linked are they to recruiting volumes. But actually they're seeing an uplift in their business driven by the fact that kind of developer recruiting continues, but no one wants to do that in person anymore. And actually, you know, the motivation to conduct that recruiting remotely and in as automated a way as possible is still there. So, I mean, there are definitely kind of secular areas where we'll see kind of changes, but I think it's kind of very uncertain at the moment. I think it'll probably be kind of 3 to 6 months before people kind of start to develop an idea around it.
Yeah, and also just speaking about recruitment, I think that, I mean, if we're going into some depression-like state, I mean, we will have a lot of people will be unemployed. I had a meeting actually with a few CTOs in Stockholm just a few hours ago, and it wasn't funny, but it was, you know, the CTOs at more normal companies, they were permitting people, and the CTOs from the gaming companies, they were desperately needing more developers. I mean, and I think that if we see a lot of people at the same time losing their job, maybe we'll go more to gig economy, and how will we more rapidly, you know, scale up our teams, scale down. I think we will see things around that too, but I'm not sure what.
Quite possibly. But I think the other thing to bear in mind, which I think has already been alluded to, is, you know, it's been a 11-year bull run in the markets generally. For tech, it's been closer to 20. Well, you know, tech valuations were not hugely impacted by 2008, and so the party had to stop at some point. And I think there definitely is an element of people were getting increasingly uncomfortable, especially around valuation. And this is a really good reason to say, okay, now I've got a reason to say why I'm uncomfortable about valuation. And that I suspect will take a while to play out. So there's two things. There's like the okay, what does the economy change look like, and how do people's behavior change? That's important. But then there's also going to be important, you know, when do people go back to risk on, and that could take, you know, usually it's what, for every 1 month you're down, it takes 3 months to get back up. So, you know, we're a quarter down at the moment, so we're looking at least another year on those numbers. But of course, that's assuming a very standard distribution. It could be much quicker, it could be much slower. We just don't know at this point. And until people have at least a theory of it, I suspect you'll see a lot of people hanging back.
Yeah.
So we've got 3 startups as always to pitch, and I think it will be very revealing to see the reactions to the pitches in this new, we're not even in the new normal yet, but in this, the pre-peak of the new normal, as John called it. I want to see kind of in the tone and in the facial expressions just how different things are in a startup pitch now as opposed to 3 weeks ago, believe it or not. And it just blows my mind that this party that we've been on, like you said, for 11 years, literally ended in the span of 2 weeks. Because you just to think when this 11-year party ends, it's going to take a year to unfold, and it's just no. It was a goddamn week. Like it was like a car crashed into the nightclub, and you know everyone has to get out immediately.
And Tyler, we have talked about this, but we have mentioned this several times. You know, sometimes, you know, something will happen, but
yeah,
you couldn't, you know, no one foreseen that, you know, it's a virus that will go like this.
No. And it's the other crazy thing is right in the very, very short term, as John said, and it's like there are in the very, very short term, in the immediate term, absolute fast track winners and hard losers in the moment, right? And like the delivery companies and the Crees and the, you know, anything that's video based, as you said, are doubling, tripling instantly. And there's some hardcore losers, you know, a lot of them, and especially on the B2B side, right? Like anyone selling anything to enterprise that isn't absolutely mission fucking critical is toast. You just got smoked, you know, and that's a lot of, or you figure out how to rejigger what you're doing in some MacGyver type of way overnight into some mission critical thing. If you were a nice to have, you're done. You know, you absolutely must be a mission critical piece, and even then you might not make it out. So it'll be crazy to see who the victims are in this massive pileup, but the video games aren't the victims for sure, as you just said.
No, it's a time for the video gamers. But then,
Yeah.
I mean, is it a new normal for video games, or is it temporary? I would assume it will be a temporary peak. I would assume that maybe when things go back to the new normal, that, I mean, maybe a lot more people are gaming than before, but maybe they will do other stuff as well. I'm not sure, but that's my guess.
So let's bring in our 3 startups. I'm trying to remember the order that we do these in. The first one, I think, is Karosh here. Yes, it is. So let's welcome Karosh from Oxford Immune Algorithmics. And let's see what the first pitch in this new crazy world looks like. Karosh, are you there? Hello, sir.
We can't hear you, Karosh.
We don't hear you, sir. Connect now. Try again.
Hi. Hello.
Hey. Hello.
Organizing this, and thank you for the invitation to speak to you.
Sure.
I will try and share my screen.
Okay.
Can you see that okay?
It's coming. There it is.
Perfect. Okay, great. Well, thank you very much for the invitation. My name is Dr. Karosh Saparsi. I'm a clinician, and I'm also here as the Chief Medical Officer of Oxford Immune Algorithmics.
Okay, hey, before you get started, I can tell you've not seen this event before.
No, I have not.
And I forgot to remind anyone in the audience who's watching for the first time, this is the part of the event that is many people's favorite part of the event, because it's the part of the event where I become very rude to the presenters and I interrupt and I...
Please do.
Yes, and it becomes very dynamic. I'm going to break your traditional, your normal pitch and force it into more of a conversation with the investors. So just so you're forewarned. So go ahead.
Okay, great. Well, please feel free to interrupt as you will. Okay. So essentially what we are doing at Oxford Immune Algorithmics is that we have created what we believe to be a groundbreaking end-to-end solution for remote blood testing. Now, we aim to do this, and we are doing this, using a combination of our own machine learning and artificial intelligence algorithms, together with our own cutting-edge handheld device. So we are primarily an AI-driven algorithmics company, but we have also created our own patented handheld device. We are a team of experts in AI, medicine, engineering, mathematics, physics, software, and business development. And we believe that our technology has applications essentially to any condition, any clinical condition that requires remote monitoring of blood. These include things like pediatric and adult cancer, so cancers in children and adults, but also bacterial infections, anemias, malaria, HIV, and others. Now, right now, what is really relevant to us is the clarity that we have that the actual need for remote blood testing, for example, is particularly paramount in a pandemic at the moment. And in fact, we have made COVID-19 a focus of our current activities, in addition to the other indications that we've been working at. Our product, the first version or release one, is ready to launch. It's CE certified. And our smart device, which will actually allow point of care testing, we call this release 2, and is its final stages of development. Our technology is protected by patents, is CE marked, and we have already secured customers in the UK, including at the National Health Service. We are seeking 1 million euros in order to really accelerate our development and expand our markets. So essentially, the need that we are addressing is that it is very important to be able to test blood, to do blood testing at home or at a point of care. And we will allow this to happen using our algorithms with the results that will be available both through an app and our desktop platform. So I mentioned Release 1. In Release 1, which is a product we currently have, this allows a finger prick blood test to be returned to our partner laboratories and the results to become available. We are not far from Release 2, in which we have created our own device, which we call a mobile health station. This is a smart device which is portable, the size of a mobile phone, and it's low cost. And this will allow true point of care testing to be available. What we hope to do in our Release 3 is to really use our algorithms to perform longitudinal causal analysis. Now, as I mentioned, Release 1 is already available. Release 2 will allow a single drop of blood from a finger point prick to be analyzed, with the cells to be imaged using our hardware. Our algorithms will then analyze the images from the cells, and within 5 minutes, we'll be able to characterize all of the cells that are in that sample. So both the number of cells, the quantity of the cells, and their shape. And this is made possible by our machine learning and AI analytics.
So a short question, is this, do you have a prototype of this already, the number 2 version, R2 version?
Yes, we do. Yes, we do. And we have a prototype, and we have patent applications that have been submitted for these.
And what's the accuracy rate of how well
Perfect.
the machine learning behave?
Perfect question. Actually, the next slide, which I am currently on, speaks to the accuracy. Okay. So the algorithms are based on our own scientific research, which come from the Karolinska Institute. Our CEO, Hector Zedel, is from Karolinska, and he is a true world expert in machine learning and AI. But we also have research from the University of Oxford and the University of Cambridge and elsewhere. So if you look at the far left, figure 1 shows what the results would be for when conventional neural networks are applied to the image analysis. That's the first box plot on the left-hand side. Actually, the accuracy of our classification is not only greater than the current gold standard, but actually it's much more reproducible, particularly when we introduce variations into the system, for example, motion artifacts. So we are currently able to identify most cell types. For example, our algorithms don't identify things like platelets because they're too small, but actually we are working on those. But essentially, our technology is superior to current gold standards. The reason that this is made possible is because the image quality that is able to be obtained from a mobile device is low. In fact, it's too low for the human eye, even an expert human eye, to be able to identify cells. That's where our AI algorithms really come into their own, is that actually, despite the low resolution, they're able to identify the cells with high resolution and high accuracy. So what we are looking to do here is address a current need. Basically, the vast majority, and I speak as a clinician, probably 95% of clinical conditions in the world, their diagnosis and monitoring requires a blood test to monitor blood cells. This is what our technology does. We are not proposing to discover some unknown biomarkers that may or may not exist. We are meeting a current need. So what happens to the data? So this is some of the images from our first version, AlgoSci Release 1, which is currently available. We are able to present the data in a very sophisticated and a very customizable manner. The users can be clinicians, or they can be patients, or they can be managers. And the data can be presented in a series of very intuitive and customizable manners on both Android and iOS apps, or on on our desktop platforms. And we have several innovative features, including, for example, the immune score, which really is transforming how clinicians view blood results. At the moment, what happens when I get a blood result, okay, it's a binary, it's normal or abnormal. But actually, we are in OIA, we are moving away from that, because actually your platelet counts can go from 100 to 300, right? That's still within the normal limit, but actually it's gone up by threefold. So the current binary clinical approach of abnormal versus normal is really missing a lot of data that's available. Now, as I mentioned, our technology can be applied to a number of different conditions, basically any condition that requires monitoring of blood cells. This chart shows some of the potential markets classified by their clinical impact and revenue potential, but also how ready we are in addressing that market. So we have a number of potential applications, including anemia, sickle cell disease, malaria, bacterial infections, cancers, leukemias. What we are planning to do, and what we have started doing, is to actually establish partnerships with healthcare professionals, so that we are offering this technology in a very responsible manner to allow what we call is supportive monitoring of the patients. The device, as I mentioned, is sufficiently low cost that can be even distributed free on a subscription model. So we want to also really engage with the subscription economy. Now, the very first focused initial market that we have adopted is pediatric cancers. So this is children that have got blood cancers, and these children require regular monitoring of their blood. This is very disruptive to the children. Okay, that means they have to leave school, they have to go to a clinic to have blood withdrawn. If the child is feeling unwell, it is very stressful for the family, because they don't know whether this is neutropenic sepsis that the child may die of. Is this recurrence of their leukemia, or is this just a bit of a cold? Our technology will allow the child to have a blood test in the 5 minutes that it takes them to stop swinging on the swing in the park, and actually have the results available at the clinician within a matter of minutes, and then the clinician can actually advise that patient. This is a very focused market. In terms of absolute numbers, the numbers of the market is small, probably about 9,000 patients every year. But this is our deliberate strategy, is because we want to initially start with a very focused and well-defined market. We're also working with clinical trial companies and with laboratories to offer both our hardware, but also our data analytic platforms.
I imagine on the other end of that spectrum would be diabetes or something.
Absolutely. In fact, there is now compelling data that every aspect of health and disease is affected by the immune system, from mental disorders to Alzheimer's to, as you said, diabetes or cardiovascular disease. At the moment, we simply do not monitor the immune system, so the white cells in the blood, for these purposes. And as I said, even as a clinician, our approach to this is really crude. So what I do to my patients is that actually we get their blood results, and actually what we tend to do is we have huge variations in their blood counts. Actually, we tend to ignore them because they are within a population normal limit. What AlgaSight will allow us to do is to define the normality for every individual patient. The longitudinal data will allow us to understand that actually if this patient is moving away from their normal mean, that means something biologically significant is happening in those patients. And then that's the data that hopefully will generate new insights, both in terms of the monitoring of the disease that they have, or for diagnosing new diseases. And in fact, ultimately, our aim is for the immune monitoring not to be performed just in patients who are unwell or have a disease, but actually normal patients, athletes, healthy people who want to make sure that they're actually in a good position.
We're running on time.
Fantastic. This is my last slide, just really summarizing some of the clinical touch points that we have experienced. Thank you very much for your time.
You're very welcome. Thank you for that. We, as you might know or you might not, we have live audience asking questions.
Great.
Through a separate app, and the most asked question at this point is, Karosh, how are you working to build trust in medtech in a post-Theranos world?
Absolutely. You're asking a very important question. And our approach to that, yes.
There might be someone on your team asking that question.
No, absolutely. So our approach is to offer this technology in a very responsible manner. So at the very last slide, I actually showed some examples of clinicians that we are working with. So for example, our approach with pediatric cancer is that we have connected to the lead clinicians in Cambridge, and actually we are working with them to devise our offer. So they can see our technology at work. They can actually, and actually we are devising and actually making changes to it based on their requirements. So actually our technology is very transparent. We have devices that can be seen. And actually the key difference between what we do and what Theranos does is that, first of all, yes, our technology is protected by patent, and actually we have know-how, but ultimately it's very simple and from a logical perspective to understand how our technology works. As I said, what we are not doing is saying, you know, we've discovered some kind of biomarker, for example, for cancer that may or may not be relevant. What we are saying is, look, we can image blood cells and we can use the image using our algorithms to identify the cells. That's very easily testable. We can actually make our algorithms function on banks of image data, for example, that are available. What we are doing is we are comparing our output against gold standard laboratories. In fact, what is very interesting is that actually, if we send the same sample of blood to 3 different certified laboratories, you know, we get 3 separate results. So actually, there's even variation within the industry. But actually, our technology is transparent, and people can experience it themselves.
I think that what you just said there might be a really compelling intro to the whole pitch and proposition, which is, here's a blood sample from somebody with this disorder, and it went to these 3 very renowned labs, and here's the 3 different results, and then here's our new technology that kind of is.
That's right.
And here's how we do it, and that, I think that would be a very compelling way to engage people right from the beginning. Anyway, I want to hear what everyone else has to say. Thoughts from the investors here, Bob or John?
I mean, obviously, I'm not a life science investor, but I did have life science investor in my former team.
Yes.
At Industrifonden. They tend to be more academic inclined, so your presentation is more academic than the ones we usually see. I would, however, just sort of thinking of it, I think the one slide that compelled me was when you were telling that your initial focus was pediatric cancer, because that's like an emotional message that really works. And then from that point, I would try to explain how in the bigger vision to build a universal transponder, Star Trek, whatever it is, to diagnose myself, or what the big vision is, to understand where you're going. And I would not end here, but I would completely, if I just critique your deck, I would completely skip out Corona unless you're able to deploy hundreds of thousands of tests within a few months with higher accuracy and cheaper than the ones being deployed right now. And the other ones, like, I'm sure you guys could do this eventually, but unless you can actually do that within a few months, I think the value of that, because we think really long term. So as soon as I start thinking about that sort of time arc, then I'm going to think like that might not be your best focus right now, unless you can beat everybody else, right?
Absolutely. So in fact, coronavirus, actually, if you look at that kind of the final box we had, actually is not one of our aims. But I was using that as an example that actually the concept of remote testing is valuable.
Sure, fair enough.
Thank you.
In terms of that concept, I'm not surprised that the most asked question related to Theranos, because it's highest profile startup in the space. I'm not a hardware investor, nor am I a life sciences investor, but I read Bad Blood, and that feels close enough.
An expert.
Exactly. And the thing I kind of took from that was that there were some kind of really significant challenges with doing kind of batteries of chemical tests on finger prick blood, because it was just not a sufficient amount of blood to run a battery of tests. Am I right in understanding that actually you're imaging the blood rather than doing the kind of chemical tests? And
absolutely. And actually, so, if I were really want to simplify it, what I would say is what our technology is, we take the blood and basically we mix the blood with a stain, right? A blood stain, which actually stains the cells basically the nucleus of the cell is a different color from the cytoplasm of the cell. Okay, and actually that generates a picture. Now, if you and I, or even a certified histopathologist will look at those images that we create, they won't be able to tell the difference. They just do not have sufficient clarity. But actually, that's where the AI comes in. So again, from a thoroughness sort of comparison, is that what we're not doing is creating new kind of fancy, unbeknown technologies. But we are combining imaging, although we have significant advancements even in the imaging. For example, we've solved the problem of the spherical aberrations that you get when you have a small lens. But so we can create the images, and then we can have the algorithms to identify the cells.
In that case, it might be a good strategy to say, computer pattern recognition can do amazing things, like it plays Mario Brothers better than any human ever could, and like etc. And we thought, well, what if we could apply this to Alzheimer's or something like that?
That's right. And
it turns out that when you do, you can do something that humans have never been able to do, and the best labs have never been able to do. And then people instantly overcomes that friction of Theranos crazy claims.
That's right. That's right. That's right. That's right.
So that's my big 2 cents to contribute to this.
Right.
Pitch.
Thank you. Thank you.
So anyway, because in that case, then it does legitimately gives you permission to get excited as the listener.
Sure.
Right. Gives you license to say, oh, well, this could be very, very cool without making wild claims of anything.
Yes, of course.
Henry, any thoughts on your end?
Yeah, so this thanks for the pitch. This reminds me of a business I invested in a previous fund called Fluidic Analytic. Which
I know them well.
Yeah, and it's and I think it has some of the similar, clearly a different focus, but some of the similar properties. And so if I just run through the issues we had to navigate with that business, and that we still have to navigate with that business. The one, I think someone has already made reference to this sort of tricorder element, and there is, I think, a certain amount of fatigue in the market of people saying, the tests you have, they're useless. I have this test that will, and it can tell you all this stuff. And so my advice would be just to steer a little away from that, because I think ever since the genome got sequenced, people have become increasingly fatigued at the idea that there's going to be this solution that we get to, and that we all get, that we have to build it together. And then the next part would be just on the go-to-market, and I think you're absolutely right. You have a number of different ways that you could take a product like this to market, but every version you try takes time, it takes money, it takes effort, and so either learn from the likes of Fluidic, or indeed plow your own furrow, but have but I think you need to convey to investors a really clear way of, okay, are we going to be selling hardware and a subscription? Are we going to be giving hardware away and putting a subscription on it? Where does this go? And then how do I stop version 1 of the product, or rather, and this is a specific Fluidic concern, was how did we stop version 2 of the product, the prospect of it existing, cannibalizing sales of version 1, which kind of feels that you may have a similar problem here of people saying, I'd love to have this, but if I just wait 18 months or however long, I get version 2, and so why would I ever buy version 1? And I know it's just pattern recognition, and it's always really bad form to try and cram your thoughts about one business onto another, but just in the very short pitch you gave us there, those are the two things that really jumped out.
Thank you. That's extremely helpful. Thank you.
No worries.
That was brilliant feedback. The most popular question from the viewers at the moment is, what is the source of your training data? Again, you might not.
Yeah.
You don't have to answer these.
Okay.
What is the source of your training data, and what is the Bayes error of your algorithm in light of the variation in analysis from different laboratories?
Okay, the first question I can answer easily, because our source data is, first of all, images that we take ourselves using our own microscopes and using our device, as well as stock images that are available, and we compare that with the standard laboratory results that are available, but also from other, if you like, desktop analyzers that are available that we have purchased. In terms of the second question, the error, that's not my expertise. I wish Hector was here who would be able to answer that question, but I can't tell you the answer to that question, I'm afraid.
Fair enough. Cool. Thank you for that. And thank you for the good question from the audience. And thank you for the feedback round on that
Great.
one.
Much appreciated.
Thank you.
Yeah, likewise,
Thank
I'm
you.
going to put you
Thanks,
back
Great.
in the holding room because we're going to
Thank you very
vote.
much.
We've got 2 more pitches. You might win tonight. We're going to let the audience vote in real time at home, everyone viewing live. So I'll put you back in the waiting room.
Great.
And let's welcome Sverker. Sverker, are you there?
Those data is first of all images that we take ourselves using our own microscopes and using.
Sverker, you're live.
As well as that are available.
Hello, Sverker.
Hey.
Hey, you are live. Could you please stop the audio on your live stream that you're watching at home?
Yes.
Okay. And go ahead and share your desktop and get your pitch underway. While you're doing that, I will bring up a question from the audience for the investors. Here's one now. With VC so dependent on strong economies, how might ecosystems innovate entrepreneurship itself, not just the products, to make positive impacts in time of crisis? That's a tricky one.
Yeah.
I don't know that we
But if
can.
you figure it out, I'll invest.
That will take another podcast to answer that one. John, this one's directly at John. I know company culture is important to you. How can or should startups work on this for social distancing, increased leave, greater needs for empathy?
Thank you, first and foremost. Good question. The one thing that I thought was interesting in the companies that I've had chief operating roles with startups before I went into investing, was to figure out sort of the underlying psychology of how we work and how we exist. So one thing that I tried to do in companies was to figure out what do we celebrate as a means of nudging and changing behavior. And in this case, I would sort of try to apply the same sort of what are our basic fundamental human needs and try to apply more of them. So we do like a daily stand-up like thing currently at our fund, which means that for sort of 15 minutes every morning, we all gather, we have a Swedish fika, which is like coffee break, together and just chatting about anything else but work, just to sort of get that thing rolling. I'm sure there's tens of those. I've seen there's like virtual parties and people doing virtual afterworks over whatever it is. But I'm sure like the need for human connection becomes much deeper right now. So just to be more human is something that I would like allow your team for that. And it's, I mean, it's terrible times. So let's allow ourselves to be vulnerable because we are. I think that strengthens unity.
It's a great point of how we will need to bring in the humanness in if we do continue to work in a remote first kind of paradigm. Sverker, are you ready?
I am.
Take it away.
Good evening, everybody. I hope you all are doing great. Stay healthy out there. The last 10 years, stress has been the major cause of employer sickness in Sweden and in the Western world. Currently, it's around 50% of all sick leaves are due to stress. But long before anyone burns out, companies are losing a lot of the productivity. Studies from Karolinska Institutet shows that 34% of the population lose 38% of their productivity, and this can go on for years before anyone burns out. So it's a huge cost, and of course it's a huge suffering for the people who burns out. So imagine if you had a digital health coach in your mobile. Think of it as a gym membership for your proactive mind. I was working as a process manager at 3, working 16 hours a day, 7 days a week. And this is the product I would have needed for me to prevent my burnout. So let me present Breathe Digital Health Code. We work with 15-second self-reflection each time. We work with self-reflection for increased self-awareness, for increased self-leadership. And yes, we have shown behavioral improvements in just 30 days. So this is the basic process for all the psychological development. It doesn't matter if you go to coach or to shrink. After the self-reflection, we give the user feedback for increased self-awareness. And we use 4 years of research to provide nudging. What do you need to improve your health? We aggregate the data up to the organization. We can show the historical data, yes, but more important, we show forecast, we show risk, and we show correlation, because there is not one single cause of burnout. It is interacting causes. There is a correlation between several different factors before anyone burnout. And that is.
Hang on, Sverker, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I'm having the thought that, again, as we might be shifting to a much more remote Zoom-driven workforce, that this could be really interesting analytical data for HR departments to have about, because they don't have the water cooler fika. And now that I think about it, a big part of the reason that one of the important things, fika is critically important because it gives everyone a chance to measure everyone else's sanity on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, and actually that is, we did a study with the investor here in Sweden, and the CEO, he didn't really care for the data. He said, the actual conversation I can have with my teammates, it's not just how you're doing, oh, everything is great. Now we can say, so how are you doing? Well, I can see that my stress is going up and I'm not sleeping enough. And that is also causing higher irritation in my family life. This is examples of what we can start to understand about ourselves long before stress becomes harmful, long before we burn out to get diabetes 2 or stroke or anything else.
It's just an interesting additional element of, if we are going to do the remote working, that we won't have a lot of the signals of knowing when people are getting stressed out, that we intuitively are able to grasp in person. So
now the dialogue we're creating here, the honest dialogue, is one of the most important factors. Absolutely.
Anyway, again, it might be an alternative way to start a pitch in
okay, thanks.
In a more narrative format.
Okay. We've been studying this for 4 years. I've been sitting with a PhD in psychology, going through 50 different psychological instruments. We've been studying what are they asking, why are they asking, and then we've been running this in 4 different studies to create statistical significance. And our current professor, Richard Toker, he says, if there is a cause and effect, we can show it. And we know there is a cause and effect. If you don't sleep enough, for example, your cognitive function decrease. And we can show this pretty rapidly for the user. Our competitors are digital employee surveys. They are traditionally showing historical data, and they are working on the organization. We do that as well, of course, but we work with individual leadership. And we work with forecast and the correlation to show if there is risk anyway. It's highly scalable. We started out as only selling this business to business. But as the discussion has been into here a couple of times, business consumer is a new target here. We can create a straight-through process for small business owner families where children not are feeling happy. There's a huge market we have 500,000 small business owners in just Sweden. They don't have any network. They don't have any company welfare system they can go to. And if you know the entrepreneurs going to the honey trap where you work yourself to death, this is a way to prevent that. So an average business to business is 170,000. Compare that to the cost of a burnout that is more than 400,000. The Swedish market is roughly 700 million in our target group annually. Germany and UK is 5 times that, and India is 30 times that. And we don't have to sell much to start to make a lot of money. 20 contracts next year, 47 contract 2022. And we started the business to consumer subscription as well. So we have a really strong team. Alireza, co-founder, he worked with a competitor weekly. Young is a psychologist. And we have some really great scientists helping us out with developing the psychology, developing the algorithm here. We do have an investment promise of 400,000. We are looking for the next to take in 600,000 to develop the version 1. And that is after we capitalized. The version 1 is 2-month product development. So let's do some real good, have fun doing it, and make money doing it. Thanks.
All righty, thank you for that. Bob, Henry, John, or Tuva?
I could jump in with a question. Can I be greedy and have 2 questions?
Yeah, and Sverker,
Hi, Bob.
Stop sharing your screen.
So I have a kind of curiosity question, which is, although the kind of value to the business of eliminating burnout or reducing burnout is massive, often the people who are most at risk of burning out are kind of quite private about it. So if you're selling to a business, I guess my first question is, how do you work with them to kind of mandate the usage of something like this? Because otherwise there's a risk that you don't capture the highest risk employees. And I guess second question is, you mentioned sleep as being a kind of big leading indicator of burnout or lack of sleep. To what extent, as this scales, do you think you can kind of start to incorporate other data sets around people's sleep?
Well, start with the first data. Since we work with the individual, we give the individual feedback. That's where we get the user rate up. If you look at our competitors, they still have in our target group, they're still running around 70% of response rate, which is good. As long as we are over 60%, we have enough data to help the organization. But since we work with the individual, if we look at my example, if I was in that group and we have this dialogue, I can see the group level, and I can see I'm way over in stress. I can hear the dialogue in the group. That's where we have a lot of the impact, and even the people who don't want to participate. You've been using normal group psychology. So that was the first. What was the second question?
The second question was in relation to other data sets that might give you other kind of leading indicators of stress, or kind of wearables, things like that.
Yeah, we prepared for that. We working with self-reflection right now, but for example, the American Psychology Organization made a huge research 2018, and they found that the 30% that was highest on stress and mental illness, it was the same 30% that was high on digital usage with social Facebook and stuff. So we created a digital stress index that we will incorporate in the algorithms, and we will incorporate physical activity a lot from the gadgets you already use. So we don't need to create a gadget. We have all the data in the iWatch, in the iPhone, and so forth.
Cool. Henry or John?
Sure. Do I understand it correctly that your business model is that you're selling this to HR departments, but the users are sort of workers or employees within the companies? Is that how you're thinking?
Yes, it's a business-to-business subscription.
I see. Good. Because I think like we see a lot of companies that do similar things, and while the science there is useful, and I'm a science, I wouldn't say fanatic, but a science advocate at least. I think since a lot of this science is kind of hard to quantify in full, I believe that a lot of the companies that become successful in this kind of crowded market, it's not the ones that have the best science, but that's figured out the best business model. So while the thing you're doing is great, I would really approach this problem from like a business model perspective and figuring out how to get that running. Because those are the companies, since you're kind of in a space, there's a lot of actors and it's very much based on some sort of belief system, then you need to crack how to make the business model work. And on top of that, sort of convey the best belief system. Unless you can provably prove that you are the absolute best from a science perspective, but even then I think it's hard, and I don't think that's very likely to go. But I would spend a lot of time figuring out and really nailing, like testing your business model, proving the business model, and eventually or improving the business model.
Yeah, I am from a science background, and I'm running gold standards, and I'm comparing our results to the gold standards. But that is not the best communication.
No, in the market though. Sadly.
No, that's true.
Cool. Henry, any thoughts there?
I think just echoing the last comment, and I think one sees a number of these types of businesses, and the question is always why is this not gonna, why can't Cree do this, or why will this not end up as a plug-in to a service, especially if you're aiming B2B2C that someone else is already producing. So I would have a good tight answer to why it is that your standalone service can survive, as it were. And then the other question I'd have, and this is similar, sorry, to the last presentation, is around go-to-market, because I'm yet to see it work where there's confusion between whether you're B2C or B2B2C or whatever. And I know it's always tempting, especially if you start to get some B2C traction, to go down that route, but making a clear effort to, this is the type of business we're going to be, I think would be a useful point.
Thank you.
Cool. Alrighty, thank you for that. And with that, I'm gonna put you back in the holding room, and we're gonna bring out the third pitch, and then we're gonna let the audience watching at home vote. So please stay tuned for that. Thank you for joining us. Back in the waiting room, and let's bring out Jonathan from WIM. And while Jonathan is joining us, I will ask a question from the audience as I did last time. Jonathan, you there? There he comes. Here he comes. So while he's joining, the top question at the moment is, assuming that the pandemic is over by summer, when do you think VC activity comes back to the level of a month ago?
What level does it mean? Investment pace or money or valuation?
I think just the return to normal as it was, a month or two ago. How far away is that? Assuming that the pandemic, big assumption perhaps, that it's over by summer.
Yeah, so we're not pacing down. I would say the only thing we're not doing is like I'm not committing to a timeline with new companies that I'm meeting starting now, but I mean our activity is continuing.
Yeah. And feel free to jump in. Anyone who has a comment there, a similar but variation on that same question. Someone says, I'm planning to raise a seed round or I was planning to raise a seed round at a 2 million valuation before the virus. What would be a reasonable valuation now?
What's your business?
Yeah, what's the business?
Given no other information, just guess.
I don't. So I suppose I'll go out on a limb and say I don't agree with Fred's comment that you posted earlier, that there's some kind of blanket of 40% down, or that we can say if you were looking for 2 million, now you should be looking for 1.5. I think it will be very, very company by company basis. And I'll go out on a further limb and say that the earlier you are, the less impact this will have. This so far, at least, the impact I've seen has been at the later stage of the guys trying to raise 100 million.
Right.
From a bunch of people who are exposed in a number of other areas, as anyone who has 100 million will naturally be. And so if you're raising a seed round and you're a good business, then the valuation, I don't think, would be materially different.
Yeah, you're not actually losing that much if you're still in the seed stage round of things. You can start over, and it's not the end of the story for you. And it's actually, this touches on a much bigger point, which is something that all of the really good investors are fond of repeating, which is that a lot of the Deca unicorns and Pegasuses that have come out over the years were characteristically born out of these very dark moments. Yeah. So that and the people who have really been around for the dark moments seemingly go into this one with a gleam in their eye of wondering what will be born out of it. Yeah, which is a really interesting thought. And actually that is one of a variation of one of the top questions on the list at the moment, which is how will COVID change the world? And what the real question is, what opportunities will open up? Which we danced around, but I wonder if anyone has thoughts around novel, unobvious opportunities on the horizon.
If I had any, I'd keep them to myself.
Okay, with that, let's welcome Jonathan from WIM.
Hi, everyone. So my name is Jonathan, and I'm the CEO and co-founder of WIM, a micro rental company that provides people with the possibility to charge their phone on the go, while at the same time allowing brands and venues to interact and stand out with customers in new ways. And so let's be honest, we've all been there, and we all hate it when our beloved iPhone is running out of battery, because it always seems to happen when we're in an inconvenient situation, and we rarely carry a charger with us. And even if we do, sitting by an outlet waiting for the phone to charge isn't necessarily ideal. So we created a solution for this using 3 components to create this one solution. So first of all, it's the app that the user uses to locate their nearest venue with a charging station where they can also read about the venue. Then we have the power bank itself, which has integrated cables for all phones on the market, and an interchangeable sticker area which brands and venues can use to do promotions or whatever. And then we have the mothership, or the actual charging station that we place in venues at the point of sale. And this station holds 10 power banks and has a 10-inch LCD screen that we use to introduce the service to the customer, but also allowing brands and venues to communicate with their customers in venue. And how it works is pretty simple. You download the app, you locate your nearest venue, and then you scan the QR code on the station, similarly to how you would rent an e-scooter nowadays. And then you can charge your phone on the go. And when you're done, you can return it at any station, and you only pay per 30 minutes or until you reach a daily cap. And here's an example of a partner that we're using, Karma, and how they use the station in their venue, or in a venue that is connected to their platform already. And this is what we would call a win-win-win situation, where they get exposure and we can charge a fee for that.
That was terrible, by the way.
And since our launch earlier this year, we have acquired over 1,000 users without any marketing spend. And we've deployed over 50 stations across Stockholm's most popular venues. And we see an average duration of when a user checks out the power bank until it checks it in at 2 hours, which is way above what we initially projected starting this. And one of the best things about this is also that we offset 110% of the energy that our power banks consume towards more sustainable alternative. And this is done thanks to a partnership we have with Tibber, which is an energy company. And we can also prolong the lifespan of your current phone, since one of the biggest reasons for why people change their phone is due to the experience of poor battery life. And looking at the market, it's potentially very big, looking at the European customer base, but we're targeting the millennials, which is the largest cohort with the highest ownership, smartphone ownership. And they have also already started to turn to services without the burdens of ownership. And the team behind this is small, but still highly competent. So it's me and Philip, who's in the business guys, who's in charge of the supply chain operations and deployment. And then the technology side is driven by or managed by Arvid and Isak, who manages the user experience, front end and back end development. And now I would usually recommend you to download the app and run out and test the service, but due to the virus, I would recommend you to download the app and try it once you're allowed to go outside. Thank you.
Thank you.
All righty. Well done. Thoughts?
How much is, I missed that, how much is it to charge?
Currently, we have 5 Swedish crowns per 30 minutes, but we're planning on implementing a variable or dynamic pricing later on.
And if I charge my iPhone, will it take like an hour?
Between 1 hour or 30 minutes to an hour, usually, depending on when you start charging.
Okay.
But it's, yeah.
Did you, maybe I missed it because I had to look at the polls for a second. Because now by the way, the polls are now open for everyone to vote for their favorite startup. And it's inside the Slido app on the poll tab. And so these are wildly popular in China. Somewhere in the neighborhood of 40% of Chinese people that use these, as astronomical of a number as that is. Is that not mentioned in your pitch?
No, usually we have a more in-depth pitch, but we had to cut some information due to the 4-minute limitation.
That would seem to be like a really important slide to include, because it totally overcomes questions of like market viability and whatnot.
So here's kind of my why I started asking the question. It's like, to me, but this is kind of maybe a Swedish-centric or Western world-centric idea. If I'm worried about running out of battery and I can't spend 200 kronor on a, then maybe is the pain high enough? Sorry to be sort of, I see how it works in China. I mean, I assume people have earned way less money there, but do you see my way of thinking?
I missed some of your question because I don't know, the screen.
No, John's bandwidth is a little low, I think.
Yeah,
sorry.
Netherlands internet, perhaps.
I blame the world.
No, but I think it is everyone in Amsterdam is watching Netflix or Pornhub at the moment, so you have to conserve the bandwidth.
No, but I think that the question was, I mean, is there business in Stockholm? And I assume, John, that your question was, I mean, why not buy your chargeable? No,
but I think spare battery.
If I can't afford, if the pain high enough, if I can't spend sort of 20 euro on a battery pack.
Yeah, usually when people buy a power bank themselves, they use it one time and then they start hoarding power banks basically. And we see from like the users we have that most of the occurrences are at like after 7, or when people are at after works or at clubs or doing things like that, and then they really have the opportunity to buy a power bank, and they don't usually want to carry it after they've charged.
We discussed this. I think we had a pretty similar company last month, right?
Yes.
And I know that we discussed this during that time as well. And I think that for me personally, I think that for me, I have like, I don't know how many portable chargers. I never use them, charge them up. I mean, it's just, but on the other hand, I'm always bringing a charger, and usually, you can charge even on a nightclub. You can find, some and I think that is that in China. I mean, is it the same situation in China? I don't know. I just wanted to secure that you're not getting blind from them getting successful, but they have another pattern of using chargers, and you see what I mean?
I think it's a mobility issue. Like if you have to use your charger and sit by an outlet, you are losing your freedom to continue doing whatever you're doing. So it's mostly paying for the freedom or the convenience of not having to sit by an outlet. But what we see in China, I actually studied and worked in China after my graduation, and they have a different behavior there, where they are usually it's pretty normal to use mobile payments, and everyone is expected to use that, which I think is something that's going to become more popular here, and our dependence on our phone is going to increase, while at the same time battery development isn't going to keep up. As we've seen in the previous models, you have a pretty constant battery level throughout the years. So I think the battery problem will still remain and even be increased with the trends keep going the way they are.
Is 5G going to be more battery intensive or less?
Yeah, when you have 5G, it's going to have to be connected to 2 networks at the same time, which will increase the drainage of your battery. I don't know for how long though, but that's what the information I've received.
I'll figure that out, because that could be an amazing point in your slide as well to overcome John's kind of thought.
But it's a question of like which curve goes down faster, the more slow sort of, or the bandwidth or the battery production curve. But I do think, like, maybe I was like prejudiced at first, but I do think figuring out your business case for a Western world is super important to make this work. I would assume that we have a higher disposable income, and I literally have my battery pack an arm's length from me at this point, so I keep around one all the time. But then maybe I'm an unusual user. I do think figuring out your business case, I mean, nightclubs, taxis, whatever the hell it is, that could actually make sense, because I'm a dumbass and forget my battery pack as well. So
and this is also why we're trying to not just copy paste what they're doing in China, to actually use the station screen and the app and the power bank stickers to basically create some kind of platform where venues and brands can engage with customers.
I'll tell you this, if you put this in a nightclub at sort of 2:30, half an hour before closing, you can charge 100 kronor an hour.
Dynamic pricing.
That's true.
Actually, I had a thought on that. I mean, have you tested this? Because I'm thinking, if I had a venue of some sort, let's say that I have a coffee shop or something, and I wouldn't really, if I had something in it and it had a commercial for, if I couldn't control the things, I'm not sure if that's a good thing, really.
No, it's obviously, it has to be something that they benefit from as well. So that's why we're finding partners like Uber Eats in a venue where they sell Uber Eats. So they could potentially sell more, while Uber have the possibility or the opportunity to retain more customers, because they're competing with Foodora and Volt on basically the same premise of selling the same food in the same restaurant. So that's one use or business case for it.
Could be good. Could be. I don't know. Think about it. It's
of course.
It might be a cash cow. It might be a blocker. I don't know. But it's.
Yeah, we usually always use the screen with the allowance from the venue owners as well before. So, but I thank you for the feedback.
Okay, so I'm going to, we have to thank you very much, Jonathan.
Thank you.
I'm going to put you back in the hiding room, or whatever it is they call it here, the waiting room. There you go. And then I'm going to share my screen again. We have a couple of quick announcements. And then we're going to reveal the winner of the voting. Where did my screen go?
Oh, this is so exciting. Everyone's voting and you can see response in real time, right? Oh,
yeah. Are you able to see who's winning on the app there?
yeah. I was definitely seeing the winner.
Okay. Oh, all results. Now I can see. Okay. So
it's moving a bit, but it's
here we go. Oh, here's all the top questions here, and then here's the 3 pitches. So we had Algo Site was the first one, the blood testing one with the image recognition. Breathe was the second one, and WIM. So go ahead and vote now. And here are your answers thus far. It looks like Algo Site far in the lead with 80%, followed by Breathe and WIM. So congratulations to Algo Site.
Yes.
It does seem to be quite innovative. So some quick announcements. Pete, April 15th has a roundtable mingle for entrepreneurs and startups. Register at meetup.com, Stockholm Entrepreneurs. That's the meetup group. And the next meetup is May 4th. And I'm very happy to have a friend of mine from General Catalyst, which just raised, I believe it was a $2.5 billion fund, which would make it double the size of any of the European funds at this point. My friend Nico there is on the board of Snap, or Snapchat as people call it. He will be joining next month. And I realized this is actually one of the cool benefits of doing this monthly event in a virtual format, is it allows me to loop in my Silicon Valley friends who are too lazy to get on a flight over to Stockholm.
Perfect. Yeah. Speaking of the new normal, this might actually be the new normal.
Yes. So now we're going to, but it was also a great example with Omers and the people today, with John being in Amsterdam. And but now we can expand much more than beyond the Nordics and even Europe with the guests, and really get the Silicon Valley guests and the Chinese investor guests, and and everybody. So next month will be General Catalyst, if not more. So, but at a minimum, we'll have Nico from General Catalyst. That'll be great. They just announced their new fund, I think 3 days ago. And so that should be a lot of fun. And I'll work on other benefits and tweaks that we can use looking back at today to optimize. But I wanted to say a huge thank you once again to all of our partners, all of the startups, but most importantly to our special guests, for giving us the time and the feedback and the insights on this crazy new landscape that we are all going through together here at the moment. Hopefully this will be an interesting thing to look back on in 10 years or 20 years and show our kids the looks on our faces and the tone of our voice as we were neck deep in this bizarre new situation that we should all find ourselves in. Yeah. Anyhow, a big thank you, you guys, for giving the time, and to the startups and to all of our partners, Microsoft, EY, Visa, Esri, Capole, EQT, NASDAQ, Swedish Energy Agency, Vinga, and Nordea. And I will see you all next time with General Catalyst on May 6th.
Yeah, super fun. Nice to
meet
everyone. Bye-bye.
Thanks, guys. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.